guys are making there. You know, you squint, you can see the negatives, but the market is focused, the market has squinted and focused on those negatives. What's your big picture takeaway from this Nvidia report?
Yeah, so I think we need to zoom out a little bit, as Tom alluded earlier, that we need to believe in how AI is going to change the world in terms of our day-to-day. And obviously, Nvidia remains the center of that generative AI transformation. And so I think you need to zoom out and not just focusing on one quarter's numbers. And we are very positive. I mean, we remain very bullish in terms of AI infrastructure. So we haven't changed our view on the back of
If your portfolio
results.
didn't have 10% limits within it, would you hold more Nvidia?
I think, given the choice, we would have. I mean, the performance of the fund would have been a lot better if we didn't have that cap, because we have sold more shares in Nvidia than we currently owned over the last 12 months or so, since Nvidia's market cap surpassed $1 trillion. So we still maintain 10% position. But at the same time, of course, in terms of the index weight for Nvidia is a lot bigger now. So to make a difference for us going forward is a lot more difficult, just because even a 10% today is the same as 10% last year. But then the Nvidia market position size in the index is about 5 now. So it's only 5% active weight on that basis.
Stephen, how do you rank the competitive threats for Nvidia? Yeah,
I mean, I've probably been asked about this quite a lot over the last 6 months or so. And I think the one thing that really differentiates Nvidia is the CUDA platform, which I would imagine that at some point is going to transition into like Apple's iOS power ecosystem. So it's not just a piece of hardware that AMD might come up with a competitive product, a bit cheaper, maybe similar performance. And at some point, because like they would need to convince a lot of software developers who have all been trained to program on Nvidia's platform to learn a new language. It's a bit like you and I going to start up a new operating system, like who is going to join that platform. It's very difficult to do that. And at the same time, of course, Nvidia is not stopping in terms of developing more things, that libraries or modules that they would allow more developers to join the ecosystems.
What about the question around hyperscalers and the concentration risk then? So 50% of their revenues, that's gone from 45% to 50% of their revenues coming from the likes of Microsoft and Amazon. And the fact that these are depreciating assets, ultimately, these GPUs.
Yeah, so our view is we are very much pro-AI infrastructure, so the likes of Nvidia, Broadcom, Vertiv, but we are a lot more cautious on AI applications of software companies. So we have actually been selling down our position in Microsoft quite significantly over the last 6 months or so. We don't own Alphabet, where I have a very bearish view on the future of Alphabet or Google Search or / Google Gemini. And so I think it's true that at the moment, all these big tech companies are big customers of Nvidia. But at some point, we would expect enterprises to take up some of the slack. So enterprises like HSBC, Unilever, GSK, like any Fortune 500 companies, they would need to have their own AI applications to.
Is this a 2000-like event? Like 2000, the internet bubble burst because we had a sort of winnowing process. We started to understand what was going to work and what was not going to work. Now, those companies didn't make money. These companies do make money. But is this winnowing process in terms of figuring out who is going to leave the race going to be akin in that kind of scale of destruction to what we saw back in 2000? How big a shakeout is what you're describing going to be?
I think it's going to be very interesting development, right? Like a lot of people say, oh, we haven't seen enough from like how AI is going to change the world. But we've only been through this journey for the last 18 months. I mean, the journey is still quite short in that context. But I do agree with you. There's going to be a lot of shakeout. I think at some point we are going to see some signs of which AI application company are going to be a true winner. Just a bit similar to Google Search was the 7th or 6th search engine being created. Like we already forgotten the other 6. And that is going to be the same thing in terms of how this is going to work. And hence, for AI application company, is a matter of survival. Like you need to invest money into the AI infrastructure in order to have a chance to raise, to compete. And at some point, some players are going to drop out just because they couldn't make it work, or maybe they haven't got enough money to spend on it, or maybe they haven't got the know-how. And I think we're going to see that in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so you're predicting a world where we don't just have the hyperscalers spending a lot of money on this, but we have other big Fortune businesses spending heavily on this. This is going to require substantial firepower then? So this is going to be a reason for lots of M&A and consolidation, I suppose, to enable the businesses to have enough money to scale up and to spend on this?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think what we're seeing now, obviously, if you just look at some of the AI application company like Microsoft, they have started the Copilot project last year, and a lot of big companies already embrace the capability that may help them to streamline their operations, increase in efficiency. I think the first kind of a step is for company to be comfortable that this is actually going to help them to save some money or maybe reduce certain headcounts in some departments. And of course, that would increase the margin profile of some of this company. But at some point, they're going to then need to spend the money themselves because like everything is very specific. You can't just have a general AI application that's going to be used across different sectors. You're going to see some vertical AI stuff, and you have some pioneer or maybe the leader of those industry to develop certain things that they would help them to compete.
So is AI for a specific sector? Is that going to be a trend that we watch?
I think that's going to be very interesting, isn't it? Just on a very high level, if we think about Google search, we have been using Google search for anything, for work, for holidays, for leisure, for anything, like even like, yeah, any knowledge, you go to Google, right? But at some point you can think about, with generative AI, we can see some vertical search engine that's probably not been developed by Google. And at the moment, like it's all about data, analytics, and obviously Google doesn't own any of this, right? All the data is available online that we have produced for them, for Google to use. And at some point, someone is going to come in to have very specific knowledge domain that would tailor to a particular industry, which is very powerful.
I have to say, just personally, using ChatGPT, all the others, much more now in terms of the search. If you want to find something out, that increasingly is the first port of call rather than going necessarily to Google. You get a much more detailed response, you could argue, in terms of what you get out at the other end.
Yeah. O1 as well. So they've come out with O1, which is a reasoning model. This is OpenAI, of course, and they had a developer day a couple of weeks ago here in London where they had developers who are building on their API. So they're building apps on the system, the software piece that OpenAI has now put out on the back of O1. And O1 takes a little bit longer to answer your question, but it does what OpenAI claims is reasoning, which it takes longer to process the arguments, and it kind of stress tests its responses to ensure it gives you an accurate response. So it addresses some of those hallucination questions, so inaccurate answers. And they are also seeing the cost coming down rapidly, a massive drop in cost, which obviously app developers welcome. The question is for OpenAI, can they absorb that cost? Are they getting the benefits of more efficient GPUs, the likes of Blackwell, which produce a lot more and a lot quicker? What they do.
So we're not getting to the point of diminishing returns yet, because that's a lot of people are beginning to talk about the idea that actually some of these models you're seeing diminishing returns. The more you put in terms of hardware, you're not necessarily getting the same responses coming out.
Yeah, so that's part of the scaling question for these models. And do they continue on the trend that they've seen? Sam Altman says, don't bet against us being able to continue to increase the efficacy and the abilities of these models, and they're increasingly looking now at these companies of agentic AI. So that's something they're increasingly talking about, this being the moment where you get AI agents built on top of these models. But I think the price point is really important, and there is an expectation that some of these foundation models will get cleared out. Maybe not OpenAI because of the resources they have, but others are facing a challenge now because of that cost pressure.
So what does that mean in terms of the way we think about the investment into the space?
Yeah, that's probably our job to, as investors, to work out like which company is going to make higher return on investment and which company might be burning cash for nothing over the next coming years.
But is that in any way obvious at this point? Is it? When does the point of clarity come in terms of who are the winners and ultimately who are the losers going to be? Because it still feels quite opaque at this point.
I think it's difficult to work out, obviously, because we're still quite early in the journey. But I think one thing is quite clear from our perspective, like within the Mag 7, we are very positive on Meta, for example, because Meta have all the data in the world about consumers. They have like 3 billion users, and just imagine through WhatsApp, Instagram and Facebook, like there's a lot of data about us. And of course, if you look at the investment they have been spending in generative AI or GPUs, everything has been spent to increase the efficiency of how they can deliver more personalized advertisement to us, which then advertisers are going to spend more money. So we can justify or see the return on investment as far as Meta is concerned. But obviously, if you think about Google Search / Google Gemini or Microsoft Copilot, this is like some application that's very new. And of course, then you need to then think about how much can they charge their customers. Okay, Microsoft charging $30 a month for Office 365 Copilot. Is that enough? Is that it'll be $60 or $100 just because it's how expensive it's going to take for the application to run, and would customer pay for it? And then you need to think about what is the real efficiency that would create for companies. So I think that's already a differentiation, that if you're doing it to improve the internal operations, I think you see a lot of things. But then if you want to create something new, that's a bit more challenging.
I'm glad you're working it all out. Great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for stopping by to figure it out for us. Stephen Yu, Blue Whale.